Sometimes the universe has a way of bringing people together when they least expect it. That's what happened to Jack and Elise, a chance encounter that would change their lives forever. If you're wondering how a simple act of kindness turned into a life-altering love story, stay with me until the end. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. If you enjoy stories about unexpected connections and second chances at love, hit that like button now and subscribe to see more incredible real-life inspired stories every week. The rain pelted down mercilessly on a dreary Tuesday afternoon in the small town of Millfield. Jack Bennett hunched over the engine of a beaten-up Honda Civic at Bennett's auto shop, the small garage he'd managed to keep afloat since his wife's passing 3 years ago. Grease stained his calloused hands as he tightened the final bolt, his mind half focused on the task and half worried about picking up his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, from school in less than an hour. At 34, Jack had resigned himself to a life of routine, work, care for Lily, sleep, repeat. Dating wasn't even on his radar. Between running his struggling business and being both mother and father to his daughter, there simply wasn't room for romance. The wedding ring he still wore served as both a memory and a shield. The bell at the front of the shop jingled, pulling Jack from his thoughts. He wiped his hands on a rag tucked into his back pocket and made his way to the front, expecting Mrs. Gillespie coming to collect her sedan. Instead, a woman he'd never seen before stood dripping wet in his shop, her helmet tucked under one arm and a look of desperate frustration on her face. "Hi," she said, pushing a strand of wet hair behind her ear. "My bike broke down about half a mile back. I managed to push it here when I saw your sign. Any chance you could take a look?" Jack glanced at the clock. 45 minutes until school pickup. "Where's the bike now?" "Just outside." "It's a Ducati." Jack's eyebrows shot up. Ducatis weren't common in Millfield. He followed her outside to find a sleek black motorcycle that looked wildly out of place in his modest parking lot. "I'm Elise, by the way," she said, extending a hand. "Jack Bennett," he replied, shaking it briefly. "Let's get this inside before we both drown." Together they wheeled the motorcycle into the garage. Jack's expert eyes immediately began scanning for obvious problems. "What happened exactly?" "It just died while I was riding." "No warning, nothing." Elise stood awkwardly to the side, her expensive-looking riding jacket now plastered to her slim frame. Despite her disheveled appearance, there was something striking about her, a natural elegance that seemed at odds with their surroundings. Jack nodded and got to work, quickly identifying the issue, a failed ignition coil. Simple enough to fix, but he'd need to check if he had the right part. "I'm on a bit of a tight schedule," he said, glancing again at the clock. "Need to pick up my daughter from school soon. But I think I can get this sorted for you pretty quickly." "You have a daughter?" Elise asked, her voice softening. "Yeah, Lily. She's 8 going on 30, Jack smiled despite himself. "It's just the two of us." Something in Elise's expression shifted, but Jack was too focused on the bike to notice. He rummaged through his parts cabinet and, by some miracle, found a compatible ignition coil. As Jack worked, Elise wandered around the small shop, taking in the modest but tidy space. Framed photos of Jack and a small girl with his same warm brown eyes lined the desk. A child's drawing of a car was proudly displayed on the wall beside his certifications. "You don't seem like the typical Ducati rider," Jack commented as he worked, making conversation to fill the silence. Elise laughed, a genuine, melodious sound. "I'm not sure what a typical Ducati rider is, but you're probably right. I needed to clear my head. Riding helps me think." Jack nodded, understanding completely. "Must be nice to afford that kind of therapy," he said without judgment, just stating a fact. Elise didn't respond directly. "Have you lived in Millfield long?" "All my life. Never found a reason to leave." Jack tightened the final connection and stood up, wiping his hands. "Let's see if that does it." The bike roared to life on the first try. Jack felt a small swell of satisfaction, the kind that came from fixing broken things, making them whole again. It was why he'd become a mechanic in the first place. "You're a miracle worker," Elise said, her face lighting up with relief. "What do I owe you?" Jack quoted a modest fee for the part and his time. He watched as Elise reached into her jacket and pulled out crisp bills, far more than he'd asked for. "This should cover it," she said, pressing the money into his hand. "This is too much," he began to protest. "Please," she insisted. "You saved me from being stranded in this storm. It's the least I can do." Jack reluctantly accepted, knowing the extra cash would help with Lily's upcoming dance recital costume. "Thank you." Their eyes met for a moment longer than necessary, and Jack felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a flutter of connection, quickly dismissed as inappropriate and unlikely. "Well, you should be all set," he said, breaking the moment. "The storm's letting up too." Elise nodded, then hesitated. "Is there a decent place to grab coffee around here? I should warm up before continuing." Jack glanced at the clock again. "Maggie's Diner around the corner makes the best coffee in town. I'm actually heading that way to pick up Lily. Her school's just past there. Mind if I follow you? Just to make sure the bike holds up?" Jack shrugged. "Sure, why not?" He locked up the shop, and they set off, Jack in his weathered pickup truck, Elise following on her luxury motorcycle. The unlikely parade made its way through Millfield's rain-slicked streets. At Maggie's Diner, Jack pulled into the parking lot, watching as Elise gracefully dismounted her bike. "Seems to be running fine," he observed. "Thanks to you," she smiled. Then, surprising him, "Can I buy you a coffee? As additional thanks?" Jack checked his watch. "I've got 15 minutes before school lets out." "Sure, a quick coffee would be nice." Inside the cozy diner, the locals turned to stare at the unfamiliar face. Elise seemed not to notice as she slid into a booth opposite Jack. Maggie herself bustled over, eyeing Elise with undisguised curiosity. "The usual, Jack? And for your friend?" "Just black coffee, please," Elise said with a warm smile that seemed to disarm even the protective Maggie. When Maggie left, Jack felt suddenly self-conscious of his grease-stained hands and worn flannel shirt. "So, are you just passing through?" "Actually, I'm staying at the Millfield Inn for a few days. I'm taking a break from my regular life." Something in her tone suggested there was more to the story, but Jack didn't pry. "Not much happening in Millfield to keep a visitor entertained," he warned. "That's exactly what I'm looking for," she said, cupping her hands around the mug Maggie placed before her. "Peace. Anonymity." Jack nodded, understanding the desire. Their conversation flowed surprisingly easily for two strangers, touching on motorcycles, the charm of small towns, and eventually circling back to Lily. "She loves dance, science, and currently wants to be an astronaut veterinarian," Jack said proudly. "She's the reason I get up every morning." "She sounds wonderful," Elise said, a hint of something like longing in her voice. "You must be a great father." "I try," Jack said simply. "It's not always easy doing it alone, but," he caught himself, surprised at his openness with this stranger. "Sorry, didn't mean to get heavy." "Don't apologize," Elise said softly. "It's refreshing to hear someone talk about what really matters to them." Jack glanced at his watch and stood abruptly. "I've got to go get Lily." "It was nice meeting you, Elise. Enjoy your stay in Millfield." "Thank you again for fixing my bike," she said. As Jack turned to leave, she added, "Maybe I'll see you around?" Jack smiled politely, assuming he'd never see this intriguing stranger again. "Maybe. Take care." Little did he know that this chance encounter was just the beginning. When Jack arrived at Millfield Elementary School, Lily was waiting with her teacher, Ms. Patterson. Her face lit up when she saw him, and she raced toward the truck, her backpack bouncing against her small frame. "Dad! You're on time," she exclaimed as if this were a rare occurrence, which, to be fair, it sometimes was. "Hey, Lillipad," he said, helping her into the booster seat. "How was school today? We learned about butterflies. Did you know they taste with their feet?" Her enthusiasm was contagious, and Jack found himself smiling as she chattered all the way home about metamorphosis and chrysalises. Their modest two-bedroom house welcomed them with familiar comfort. While Lily sprawled on the living room floor with her homework, Jack began preparing dinner, simple spaghetti, one of the few dishes he'd mastered since becoming a solo parent. "Dad," Lily said, looking up from her math worksheet, "can we go to the park tomorrow after school? Emma said there's ducklings at the pond now." "We'll see, sweetie. I've got that transmission job for Mr. Parker tomorrow." Lily's face fell slightly before she recovered. "That's okay. Maybe Saturday?" Jack felt the familiar pang of guilt that came with balancing work and parenting. "Definitely Saturday," he promised. "We'll bring bread for the ducks." Later, after dinner and Lily's bath, Jack tucked his daughter into bed. This was his favorite part of their routine, these quiet moments when the world narrowed to just the two of them. "Story time?" Lily asked hopefully, even though she was getting old enough to read on her own. "One short one," Jack agreed, selecting a well-worn picture book from her shelf. As he read, his mind briefly wandered to the mysterious woman with the Ducati. There had been something compelling about her, not just her obvious beauty, but a certain authenticity that had caught him off guard. He pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the dragons and princesses that populated Lily's storybook world. The next morning brought sunshine after the previous day's rain. Jack dropped Lily at school and arrived at his shop to find a line of vehicles already waiting for service, a good sign for his struggling business. He lost himself in work, the familiar problems of engines and transmissions occupying his full attention. It wasn't until mid-afternoon that the bell jingled again, and Jack looked up to see a familiar face. "Elise?" She stood in the doorway looking completely different than the day before. Gone was the motorcycle gear, replaced by simple jeans and a blue blouse that somehow looked expensive despite its simplicity. Her dark hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders. "Hi," she said, seeming almost nervous. "I hope it's okay that I stopped by. My bike is running perfectly, by the way." Jack wiped his hands on a rag. "Good to hear. What brings you back?" Elise hesitated. "Actually, I was wondering if you could recommend any local attractions? Things worth seeing while I'm in town." Jack raised an eyebrow. Millfield wasn't exactly a tourist destination. "Well, there's the Historical Society Museum. It's small but interesting if you like local history. The hiking trail along Miller's Creek is pretty this time of year. And Doreen's Bakery makes pies that people drive from 3 counties away to buy." "That all sounds lovely," she said. Then, with a directness that surprised him, "Would you be willing to show me around? Maybe this weekend?" "I'd pay for your time, of course." Jack stared at her, taken aback. "Pay me? I'm a mechanic, not a tour guide." Elise flushed. "I didn't mean, that came out wrong. I just meant I wouldn't want to impose on your free time. Look, I appreciate the offer, but weekends are reserved for my daughter. I don't get enough time with her as it is." Elise nodded quickly. "Of course, I understand completely." She turned to go, then paused. "What about if your daughter came along? I saw there's a carnival setting up at the edge of town. Maybe you both would like to join me there? My treat, to thank you properly for rescuing me yesterday." Jack hesitated. Lily would love the carnival, and his budget for extras like that was tight this month. Still, something felt off about accepting such an invitation from a stranger. "That's a generous offer, but—" "Please," Elise said, her expression surprisingly vulnerable. "The truth is, I'm here alone trying to figure some things out, and I could use some friendly company. No strings attached. There was something in her eyes, a loneliness that Jack recognized all too well. Against his better judgment, he found himself nodding. Lily would love the carnival, he admitted. But you should know we're a package deal. If she doesn't like you, that's it. Elisa's face broke into a genuine smile. That seems fair. I'm willing to take my chances. They arranged to meet at the carnival on Saturday afternoon, and Elise left with a lighter step than when she'd arrived. Jack watched her go, wondering what he'd just gotten himself into. When Saturday arrived, Lily was beside herself with excitement about the carnival. Jack had told her they were meeting a new friend there, which had only heightened her curiosity. Is she your girlfriend? Lily asked as Jack helped her into the truck. No, definitely not, Jack said firmly. She's just someone passing through town whose motorcycle I fixed. She wanted to thank us by taking us to the carnival. Is she pretty? Lily persisted with the directness only children possess. Jack focused on buckling her seatbelt. She seems nice. That's what matters. They spotted Elise waiting by the carnival entrance, a bright spot amid the family streaming in. She waved when she saw them, her face lighting up in a way that made Jack's stomach do an unexpected flip. You must be Lily, Elise said, crouching down to the girl's level. Your dad told me you're learning about butterflies at school. I love butterflies too. Lily studied her with the frank assessment of childhood. Do you know they taste with their feet? I did know that, Elise replied seriously. And did you know some butterflies live for only a few weeks, while others can live for almost a year? Lily's eyes widened with interest, and Jack could see his daughter's initial reservation melting away. Within minutes, Elise had passed the critical first test. The afternoon unfolded in a blur of cotton candy, carousel rides, and carnival games. Jack watched in amazement as Elise matched Lily's energy, never once checking her phone or seeming bored by the child's enthusiasm. At the ring toss booth, she cheered loudly when Lily managed to land one ring, earning a small stuffed penguin that the girl clutched proudly. Your turn, Dad. Lily insisted, and Jack found himself stepping up to try his luck. $5 for 3 rings, the carnival worker said. Jack hesitated, calculating the expense against his mental budget, but Elise was already handing over the money before he could object. I invited you both, remember, she said quietly. Please let me. Jack landed 2 rings, earning a larger stuffed animal that Lily immediately claimed as her penguin's mother. As they walked away from the booth, Lily skipped ahead, captivated by the sight of a face-painting stand. You're good with her, Jack observed. Do you have kids? A shadow crossed Elisa's face. No. It just wasn't in the cards for me. I'm sorry, Jack said, sensing he'd touched a sensitive subject. Don't be. Life takes different paths for everyone. Elise watched Lily with a wistful expression. She's wonderful, though. You've done an amazing job, especially on your own. I had a good example, Jack said, thinking of his late wife. But thank you. As the day progressed, Jack found himself relaxing in Elisa's company. There was something disarming about her, a lack of pretense that made her easy to talk to. She asked thoughtful questions about his life in Millfield and listened attentively to his answers, never making him feel judged for his modest circumstances. By the time evening arrived, bringing with it the carnival lights and a gentle breeze, Lily had declared Elise the best grown-up friend ever, and was holding both their hands as they navigated the increasingly crowded fairgrounds. One more ride, Jack promised as Lily begged to go on the Ferris wheel. Then we need to head home for dinner. Actually, Elise ventured, I was wondering if I might treat you both to dinner. There's that Italian place in town, Mario's.